Have you ever prayed, and heard nothing reply? No whisper. No sign. Only the quiet hum of your own breathing. Like waves returning to a distant shore. Ibn Arabi once wrote that silence is God's most eloquent speech. For in the spaces where words cannot reach, something far greater is unfolding. A conversation not of tongue, but of presence. We call it emptiness. We fear it. Because we were taught that God is in the thunder, in the voice, in the answered prayer. But what if the holiest moments are the ones where nothing happens? When every door seems closed. When your heart calls out and the sky stays still. Perhaps it is not distance you are feeling. Perhaps it is the weight of divine attention. The silence that holds you is not neglect. It is the sound of being watching over its echo. There is a saying among the Sufis. The beloved hides his voice so the lover may learn to listen. What if this silence is the lesson? What if the space you call loneliness is the exact chamber where God is teaching you to hear without hearing? To see without seeing? To love without needing an answer? Think of it. Every prophet, every seeker, every heart that ever broke in longing has walked through this same quiet valley. Even Muhammad, peace be upon him, waited in the stillness of Hira, the cave echoing with nothing but breath, until the silence became revelation. So do not rush to fill what feels empty. Sometimes, what seems like God's absence is simply his invitation to pause, to become vast enough to receive him again. And in that stillness, you might realize it was never that God became silent. It was that you finally became quiet enough to hear. Ibn Arabi once wrote, "When the real hides his speech, he speaks through your heart." What a paradox, that the deepest form of communication arrives without a single word. We think silence means abandonment, that the beloved has turned away. But in truth, silence is often the moment when God draws nearest. So near that his presence no longer needs sound. It is said that when light grows too bright, the eyes cannot see. And when love becomes too vast, the heart must fall into stillness to bear it. That stillness is not void, it is overflow. It is how the infinite speaks to what cannot contain infinity. We live in a world of noise, prayers, plans, and explanations. We speak so much that we forget to listen. But Ibn Arabi reminds us, the divine voice is hidden beneath the veil of your own speech. So sometimes, when your words fall away, it means God is reclaiming the conversation. In simpler words, when God seems silent, it may be because he is speaking in a language too subtle for sound. He speaks through delay, through longing, through the ache that won't leave your chest. Every unanswered prayer is not a rejection. It is a translation. It is God saying, wait, the answer must first bloom within you. And so, what feels like emptiness is often the soil of transformation. Just as seeds break open in the dark, your soul breaks open in silence. So when you sit before that vast quiet, do not ask, why won't you speak? Ask instead, what are you saying that I have not yet learned to hear? For divine silence is not absence. It is intimacy beyond comprehension. Stay with me until the end. For what Ibn Arabi revealed about this silence may change the way you see every unanswered prayer. He said, there is a voice that cannot be heard, yet all hearts recognize it. That voice is the whisper beneath the quiet, the pulse of existence itself, the rhythm that moves through breath, through waiting, through loss. When God becomes silent, it is not the end of conversation, it is the beginning of intimacy. Because the mind listens for words, but the soul listens for presence. And sometimes, God must quiet the world around you, so you can rediscover how to listen from within. You see, silence has many faces. To the restless heart, it feels like rejection. To the awakened heart, it feels like being held. This is the secret Ibn Arabi wanted us to uncover. That divine stillness is not punishment, but preparation. Think of it like this. When the sky seems empty before dawn, it is not because the sun has died. It is because the light is gathering itself for return. So too, when your prayer seems to fade into nothing, it is because the answer is still forming within you, ripening in the unseen. God does not vanish when he is silent. He descends into the quiet chambers of your being. And there, he speaks in the language of patience, teaching you that not every truth is meant to be spoken aloud. So do not mistake stillness for distance. Do not confuse delay with denial. The silence you fear is the threshold to a deeper kind of hearing. The moment when the listener and the beloved become one in breath. Imagine this. A young seeker once came to his teacher, eager and full of words. He spoke of prayers, of visions, of questions he could not quiet. His teacher smiled gently and poured him tea. The cup filled, then overflowed. Golden liquid spilling across the table. "Master," the seeker cried, "you're spilling it." The teacher kept pouring. Then, setting the pot aside, he whispered, "How can I offer you anything new when your cup is already full?" The seeker fell silent. And in that silence, something ancient stirred. A realization that emptiness is not a flaw, but the very beginning of knowing. This story has traveled through Sufi circles for centuries. It is simple, but it hides a secret. The real cannot pour truth into a vessel already filled with noise, opinions, and expectation. To receive, you must first be emptied. And that emptying often feels like loss. When God becomes silent, he is not withholding his voice. He is emptying the cup of your heart, so that it may be refilled with something pure. Something you could not have carried before. Think of the seasons. The trees must lose their leaves, so they can bear fruit again. So too must your heart shed its leaves of certainty, so it can bloom in surrender. In simpler words, when life empties you, it is not ending you. It is clearing a space for something unseen to arrive. And that space, that quiet hollow within, is not loneliness, it is invitation. The same silence that once frightened you becomes the chamber where divine wine is poured. So the teacher's message remains. Do not fear the spilling of what you thought was yours. For only the empty cup can taste the infinite. Now, let us go deeper. When the cup of the heart has been emptied, it begins to hear a different kind of speech. Not from the tongue, but from the depths of being itself. Ibn Arabi taught that the heart is a mirror. When dust gathers on its surface, we see only ourselves. But when silence comes, when the breath slows and the noise of wanting fades, the mirror clears. And what shines upon it is not you, but the reflection of the real. This is the secret of divine communication. God does not always speak in words. He speaks in nearness, in alignment, in resonance. The Quran reminds us, "We are nearer to you than your jugular vein." Yet how often do we live as though he is distant? As though the sacred were somewhere else? In simpler words, the silence you hear in prayer is sometimes the sound of that nearness, so close that it no longer echoes. Silence, then, becomes a form of speech. The absence of sound reveals the language of the heart. The language of still knowing. Of unseen guidance that moves through intuition. Through tears that rise without reason. Through peace that comes without understanding. When Ibn Arabi spoke of the eye of the heart, he meant this state, where seeing and hearing merge, where the soul begins to recognize the subtle movements of mercy. So when your prayer meets no reply, do not leave the moment too soon. Wait. Breathe. Let the silence polish your mirror again. For what you call emptiness is the clearing through which the beloved's reflection returns. And the lesson hidden in every quiet moment is simple. Sometimes, you do not need to speak to be heard. You only need to be still enough to understand. Ibn Arabi spoke of two divine movements, contraction and expansion. Al-Qabd and Al-Bast. They are the rhythm of existence itself. The inhale and exhale of the divine through creation. When you feel distant, when prayer becomes dry and heavy, you are in a moment of contraction. The soul drawn inward, the light hidden behind a veil. But when joy returns, when the heart feels open again, that is expansion. The veil lifting, the heart breathing God's nearness. And between these two, there is always a breath. A still point where absence and presence meet. Where silence becomes revelation. The Quran reminds us, with hardship comes ease. Not after it, with it. The two walk together. As night walks with dawn, so too does silence walk with the voice of the beloved. In simpler words, when God withdraws his sweetness, he is not abandoning you. He is stretching your heart to hold more light. The soul must learn how to bear both distance and union. For both are forms of love. Think of the ocean tide. When the water pulls away, it is only gathering strength to return. And when it comes rushing back, it carries treasures from the deep. So, when your prayers return unanswered, know this, the tide is gathering. The silence is preparing to speak. Every contraction refines you. Every expansion reminds you. The real moves through both. Teaching you that faith is not only the joy of presence, but also the patience of waiting. So, when you breathe and feel that ache, the still space between longing and relief, remember, that is the breath of the beloved. It is how God keeps your heart alive. There comes a moment when the seeker stops asking, and simply begins to listen. Not with the ears, but with the space within the chest. That quiet, trembling place, where longing becomes light. Ibn Arabi called this Sam al-Qalb, the listening of the heart. It is how the soul hears what the world cannot translate. For when the outer ear grows tired of waiting for answers, the inner ear begins to awaken. You have felt it before. The peace that arrives in the middle of pain. The subtle knowing that everything, somehow, is held. That is the sound of God's silence speaking through you. We often think we must climb toward heaven to be heard. But perhaps the real descends instead, lowering his speech until it touches the pulse beneath your ribs. Every breath becomes a verse. Every heartbeat becomes remembrance. In simpler words, to hear God, you do not need to go anywhere. You need only to arrive fully where you already are. When the mind stops chasing, when the tongue grows quiet, the heart begins to translate what silence has been saying all along. That you are never unheard. That every moment of waiting was itself a conversation. So begin to listen differently. Not for words, but for presence. The warmth that gathers around stillness. The peace that asks for no explanation. And when you feel nothing, remember that even nothing is sacred. For the heart that waits in love is already being answered. This is the way of the Sufis. To listen until silence turns into song. And to realize that what you were seeking has been whispering through your very breath all along. Return now to where we began. That moment of stillness. When you sat before God and heard nothing. It no longer feels empty, does it? Because now you know. The silence was never a wall, it was a doorway. Ibn Arabi said, the real is the listener and the heard. The seer and the seen. In every pause between your prayers, he was already answering. Not in sound, but in being. All along, the silence you feared, was the language of intimacy. It was the divine leaning close enough for his nearness to dissolve the need for words. When the ocean embraces the shore, it does not speak. It simply arrives. So too does God arrive in the heart that has learned how to be still. Think of your own journey. The tears, the waiting, the quiet nights. Each one was not distance, but gentle training. A polishing of your mirror. A widening of your vessel. The emptiness you carried was the space through which love could enter. In simpler words, when God became silent, he was not withholding himself. He was transforming your way of hearing, teaching you to find him in breath, in pause, in the unseen rhythm that holds all things. Now, every silence becomes a prayer. Every unanswered moment becomes a verse of remembrance. And every ache becomes a bridge back to him. So may peace find you in the silence you once feared. May your heart learn to hear what cannot be spoken. And may you discover, in the quiet between two breaths, that God was never silent. He was simply speaking through stillness. These are only reflections. May I be mistaken. And may truth find you where you are.